Well, and I think that kind of transitions us nicely into another kind of topic that we're on kind of the watch for is maybe that perceived agency overreach, right? Because they have the data, they have the ability to cross check between multiple tax types, between multiple agencies, such that they have data to know of your existence, but also do a jeopardy assessment, right? So if they have just any sort of underlying data, they have the right to extrapolate that and kind of come up with a number that you then have to affirmatively, through the kind of abatement process or appeals process, prove them wrong, right? I think we've talked about this earlier, going back to California. We had a client who had payroll kind of initial final in 1 year in California, had no other activity. We did all the right things, register with the economic development group for payroll, got a sales tax license, non-taxable product, filed an FTB return. We got, I think, a $200,000 assessment at the end of the day between P&I and tax, when the federal TI of the entity as a whole was like $100,000. But again, it was a $200,000 assessment, which is a ton of money for this company. And we had to appeal it. Fortunately, we followed everything. We had our kind of research in our back pocket. If you're not going to file a return, you need to be ready to have the documentation to provide should you get that, right? So there's that twofold, Tram, like you said. It's like you can go ahead and file the return, just protect yourself. But if you have a sales tax license in 46 states as a remote seller, that's a lot of money to pay for just the sheer cost of compliance of doing an income tax return, assuming that someone's going to charge you anywhere from, $1,000 to $3,000 to file those returns. That's a lot of money to just voluntarily file an income tax return to protect statute. So if you're not going to file a return, you should really build your case in order to kind of have a canned response to, hey, where's your income tax return? Because the data's out there and the assessments are out there and they're big. Not necessarily one of our top tons, but something that we are seeing a lot is the increased scrutiny with agents in our voluntary disclosure process. It's really easy to be a non-compliant taxpayer. At the end of the day, most people want to do the right thing. And so they kind of apply through the voluntary disclosure process. And it used to be pretty lax. It's a wonderful administrative kind of program that the states have. But in the last kind of year, we've seen a lot more scrutiny. I know, Stacey, you've got a specific kind of example that we've dealt with within the last couple of weeks within Florida. And Florida is usually a pretty, relaxed state when it comes to that.
Yeah. So, and I feel like maybe Florida is even tweaking maybe some of their procedures. And, we may see this with other states as we go along and do more and more VDAs. But Florida, they've really kind of taken the position that they don't want to extend any deadlines or any dates. And so for those that, may not be very familiar with a VDA process, I mean, you typically are applying, and for Florida, you apply on an anonymous basis, you send a letter, and then they come back and they request additional information from you. And then the process really kind of gets started and the clock starts ticking. But what's interesting is that a lot of states, and Florida being one of them in the past, at least, to Meredith's point, has been pretty flexible. And if you needed additional time in order to comply with the rules or to provide the additional documentation that they requested, they were usually pretty good about giving that to you, and you wouldn't have to reapply. Well, now they're taking a little bit harder line on it, and I think it's because they are getting a lot of applications, and they're wanting to get them closed faster. And so what we're seeing now is that they will close any cases that are open within 45 days. And then taxpayers, therefore, if taxpayers haven't provided the information required or requested in that 45 days, then they'll close out the case, and taxpayers then need to reapply. So they're taking a little bit harder line on it. And again, it's all because they don't want this stuff lingering. And so we can totally appreciate that. But I guess the story here, or the moral here, is that if taxpayers are wanting to become compliant, wanting to enter into these programs, we need to be really ready with our data. We need to be ready to have everything, with a nice bow on it, honestly, to submit to these states so that they can process it and get it moved through the system, and then not have to reapply and or suddenly get the taxpayer into a kind of potentially icky situation where maybe the state knows who they are. We haven't provided the documentation. They're not actually in a program, and therefore the state could actually, come back and assess them outside of a VDA, which is really what we don't want.
Well, and also I've had conversations with other assault colleagues who have, the whole program of being anonymous with the VDA, where there are providers who are submitting these requests non-anonymously, right? They're disclosing. So where you have a provider who is really not taking, the prudent care to say, hey, we want to make sure the information doesn't disclose the identity of the taxpayer. And if they need to be super mindful of getting things within that time frame, especially when they are disclosing. So I think that's kind of a double whammy there.
Well, and to your point, Tram, we've seen a lot more states automate their VDA process. When I first started doing these, every state was a letter that you snail mailed via USPS to, the VDA mailbox at, PO Box XYZ. Probably 10 to 20 of them are electronic online applications. And of those, most of those are disclosed taxpayer EIN, and they will kind of automatically accept you or reject you straight out of the gate. Now there is some flexibility sometimes with that, and states will still kind of like work through that with you. Because even with maybe some of this increased enforcement, I've had a lot of VDA agents who are like really wonderful, and they're like, hey, looks like an old company with this EIN under this name registered back in 2011. Do you have any idea? And it's like, have no idea, but they're like, all right, well, I think we could do this, or here's how we can help you. So again, that human connection is really why we've always kind of recommended a VDA, because the agents are good people and they are just trying to find, willing taxpayers. But that doesn't change the fact that they do still have a job to do, and you do still need to comply with the rules and get all your facts correct. If you're an 86272, you need to disclose that in a return filing. If, we had a situation where an agent got upset because kind of digging through the data, we found more exempt customers or duplicative invoices, and the amount that we told that we was due in the letter and what was actually due was significantly different, and they almost, rejected the VDA because of that. So, again, full circle back to Stacey's point is like, you got to kind of have everything ready to go for a variety of reasons when you send the application in.
Right. And I think too, kind of going back to what we talked about with the enforcement piece and having to look at both sales tax and income tax, I think a lot of the states they're asking more questions and are requiring more information in the application process about both types of taxes. So it's really important for taxpayers to, when we are coming forward, to tell the agents the whole story. Now, again, we might not totally know the whole story once, when we're trying to get these VDAs in, because, you are in a little bit of the, hey, I want to get myself in the queue. I want to get these taxpayers in the queue, because once they're in the queue, if they were to get contacted, then we're positioning ourselves much better. But we need to really understand the facts so that we're portraying everything and being very upfront and in our applications, so that the states are not going to kick us out of the program because maybe we didn't represent something accurately, not and totally inadvertently, but we didn't portray something accurately in our initial application, because we have seen states push back on that too.
Yeah, so all things to watch out. Again, and we've said this before, we'll say it again, we'll continue to say it, don't ignore the mail. Reach out, because again, facts matter, paper matters, data matters. So, don't go at it alone. We've filled out the facts, the paper, all of that multiple times with multiple jurisdictions. So we here at Saltivation are here for you. And thanks again for following us, and we'll see you next time.